I have some notes, but let me be clear. This is not an anti-ACOTAR video. I love this series. I am deep in it. I'm thinking about it constantly. But I think one of the most fun things about loving a story is being able to argue with it a little bit, to notice the places where it unsettles you, where you feel tension between what the story wants you to feel and what you actually feel. Also, spoilers ahead for books 1 through 4, so through A Court of Frost and Starlight. Let's get to it. Question number 1. What is the difference between Tamlin locking Feyre in the house and Rhys binding her to spend 1 week a month at the Night Court for the rest of her existence? This is probably my biggest question, and I know the immediate answer people would give is intentions. Tamlin's actions stem from control, possessiveness, his own trauma, his need to protect Feyre from the myriad of things and people that would have her dead. Rhys's actions stem from wanting to save Feyre, give her space, give her freedom, give her a fuller life. And honestly, I don't think the difference here is that one of them means well and one of them doesn't. I think both of them, in very different ways, believe they're acting in Feyre's best interest. So for me, intentions kind of fall away, and I'm more interested in the consequences of their actions. In one case, Feyre is so negatively impacted by being locked in the Spring Court Manor that it is enough for her to flee her home and the one she loves, not just the one she loves, but the one she literally gave her life for, the one she died for, being literally imprisoned in the Spring Court, even for a short amount of time, would obviously surface the trauma that she experienced under the mountain. The cell, the lack of control, and especially the trial where the ceilings were literally closing in on her. Being trapped again makes total psychological sense as a breaking point. But then, in the other case, Feyre is also being acted upon against her will. She is trapped by a bargain with Rhys. Under the mountain, he held her survival over her head in order to get her to agree to that bargain. He refused to help her unless she made this bargain that she desperately did not want to make. And then every month she is literally winnowed away against her will to the Night Court. And to me, that should also feel reminiscent of the horrors under the mountain. Not only because it's coercive, but because Under the Mountain was full of bargains and forced terms. Feyre made a bargain with Amarantha, the free trials, to save Tamlin. So it would make sense to me that being forced into a magical agreement and then being transported against her will to a place that she doesn't want to be would also surface some of that trauma. But it doesn't, not really. It angers her, irritates her, she's frustrated, she's annoyed, she lashes out, and then it eventually becomes the route through which she falls in love with Rhys. And I know I'm oversimplifying things. I know the Night Court is different experientially. Once she's there, she has more room, more autonomy, more purpose. But I still feel an inconsistency because if the story is going to be psychologically grounded, if the character's own justifications and internal world are supposed to dictate where we as readers land, then I don't think I can just fully ignore the fact that both situations involve coercion. Both situations involve Feyre being put into a situation against her will. Both involve a man deciding that he knows what's best, that he knows what's necessary. Both involve protection being used to justify overriding her autonomy. I'm not saying Tamlin and Rhys are the same. I'm saying the story wants me to experience one act of control as a violation and the other as somehow a pathway to healing and love. Second question. Why don't we forgive Tamlin for his trauma? This is one of the questions I keep on circling, because ACOTAR is actually full of traumatized characters. Elain, Nesta, Feyre, Rhys, more. All of them are warped by pain in different ways. And the story gives them room for that. It lets them be difficult. It lets them be damaged. It lets them hurt people or withdraw or lash out or become distorted by what they've been through and still remain forgivable. But Tamlin feels different. To be fair, Rhys does handle his trauma better in a lot of ways. He eventually lets Feyre in. He lets his inner circle in, at least sometimes. He doesn't respond to fear by trying to confine Feyre or make her smaller in the way Tamlin does. And that difference matters. But I still think the question has legs because Tamlin is one of the only major characters whose trauma seems to be disqualifying. His fear, control, and temper just make him flawed. They make him feel in the logic of the story unforgivable. And I keep wondering why. Why do we forgive Nesta for cruelty born of pain? Why do we forgive Elain for passivity? Why do we forgive Rhys for the way his suffering turns him into a martyr who makes unilateral decisions for everyone else? But Tamlin's trauma becomes the end of the road. And maybe the answer is that Rhys's damage still leaves room for Feyre to grow, while Tamlin's shuts her down. His trauma expresses itself through rage and control rather than withdrawal, secrecy, or self-sacrifice. I think all of that is true. But even so, ACOTAR extends compassion to so many damaged people and seems much less interested in extending it to Tamlin. It's almost convenient. Moving on, number 3. Rhys's moral code feels selectively applied. This is the one that keeps opening bigger and bigger questions for me. Because Rhys is absolutely no stranger to necessary evil. He manipulates, he controls, he degrades Feyre publicly so he can help her without Amarantha suspecting that he cares. He makes her drink, he forces the bargain, he kills others, he allows people to suffer in order to remain in Amarantha's favor. He plays Amarantha's game so he can have access and control over the people who would harm those he loves. He does all of this for those he loves. He does this to shield Valeris. So the series is already established. Rhys is willing to let the ends justify the means. He's willing to do something awful to prevent something worse happening. By the way, I have a whole topic on necessary evil in ACOTAR. If you're interested in that, I'll link it above. Anyway, I think it's one of the most interesting moral threads in the series. But then I start wondering, if Rhys is so willing to cross serious moral boundaries for the greater good, why does he suddenly seem to stop at other lines that would also serve the greater good? For example, why not alter the minds of the Illyrian war camp leaders who refuse to let girls train and allow wing clipping to continue? It would obviously be a violation to manipulate someone's mind, but Rhys has spent centuries doing awful things for the greater good. Why is that line suddenly uncrossable? Why not alter Tamlin's mind so that he protects his borders properly and stops endangering the human territory? Why not use his power to make allies of the other High Lords during their meeting before the war against Hybern? Why not convince Keir to fight with him in the war without the negotiation over Valeris? Maybe I'm forgetting something. Maybe some of those people have mental shields or there's some sort of magic boundary. But here's the thing. Rhys is so powerful. His power is so strong that it should and sometimes does override limitations. He is so powerful, it creates a real problem in the series because it feels like if he uses his power consistently, conflict resolution would become too easy. It's like the story has to selectively limit him because otherwise there would be no plot. If Rhys is willing to manipulate, violate, kill, and morally compromise himself to protect the people he loves, then I want a clearer sense of what principle is actually stopping him in the cases where he does not use that power. What's the line? Number 4. Feyre's loyalty to her sisters feels emotionally unearned at first. Nesta and Elain are awful early on, especially Nesta. And I know there are reasons for that. I know Feyre swore a vow to her mother to protect her family. I know that beneath all of her sister's mistreatment of her, they are still family. There's still love there. But even so, I remember thinking, why do we care so much about these people? These are the sisters who let her brave all of the dangers of the winter woods to hunt for them, to keep their family alive. They did nothing to help her. She was 14. They tried to claim any extra money she earns to spend it frivolously, and they treat her cruelly, at least in Nesta's case. And then later, the narrative wants me to believe that their safety and well-being are morally and emotionally central, not just to Feyre's story, but to the whole story. And I'm not saying I never got there, because I did, but I do think that the story asks for that investment before it's earned. Those are all my complaints. For now. In all honesty, I love this series. I can't stop talking about it. It's why I made this video. If you disagree with me, please tell me. Seriously, I would love to hear the counter arguments, especially on the Tamlin versus Rhys control question and the difference between their trauma and who gets forgiven and who doesn't. Okay, thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.